Good evening, everybody. I'm Scott Doherty. I'm one of the selectmen. Thank you all for coming tonight. I just want to make a few introductions. Ken Westway from the Select Board is here with us tonight. Ben Blair from the Select Board is here with us tonight. Mr. David Katz, Chairman of the Board of Directors at Canterbury Shaker Village. Corey Clark is here from DES, and Jim Weber is here from DES. So what we're going to do tonight is DES has a presentation that they're going to give, and then we'll open it up to questions and comments. As you can tell, the acoustics in here are terrible. So I will probably repeat each question as you ask. So I would ask that you speak up. Couple more things. There is some water in the back. If you get parched, bathrooms are here, and obviously emergency exits are straight out back or straight up this way, depending on where you are. Any questions before we get going? Seeing none? Go.
All right, thank you. Thanks for everybody coming out. My name is Corey Clark, as Scott said. I'm Chief Engineer at the Dam Bureau. So just a quick background on the Dam Bureau here in the state of New Hampshire. We have 3 sections in the Dam Bureau. We have the engineering construction section that oversees all the major repairs on state-owned dams here in New Hampshire, which up there 270. We also do operations on 208 dams in New Hampshire. And then we also have the dam safety and inspection section, of which Jim Weber is one of our dam safety engineers. And so that dam safety and inspection section oversees all the regulation of all both public and privately owned dams in New Hampshire. There are roughly 2,600 dams in the state, and really that comes into play. Anything over 6 feet in height is a jurisdictional structure in New Hampshire. We'll be talking a little bit about hazard classifications here tonight. Just a quick background on that. There's 4 different hazard classifications in New Hampshire. It has nothing to do with the age of the dam. It's really if that dam was to fail, what would happen downstream. And so here in New Hampshire, we have what we call high hazard dams. Those dams, if they were to fail, would probably be loss of life downstream. We have significant hazard dams. If those dams were to fail, it'd be impacts to either a state route or significant economic impacts. And then we have what we call low hazard dams. If those fail, typically a town road. And then we have what we call non-menace dams, more of the farm pond dams here in New Hampshire. So we're here tonight to discuss Lyford Pond Dam, really kind of a background on the dam, how we got to where we are tonight, and possibly some steps in the discussion of where we go from here. So this is just a quick shot of Lyford Pond. The downstream side, this is the stone wall in the dam. You can see some seepage occurring, water coming through the dam. Actually, in the lower part of that photo is where there is a really old cast iron valve down there. So at one point in time, you could actually let the water out of the dam using that valve. That valve is now pretty much all sedimented in, only the very top portion is showing beneath the rock. And so we'll get into that a little bit more as we move forward. So, bit of the agenda, as I previously discussed, we're going to be talking about the dam, hazard classification, deficiencies or issues that we've noticed at the dam over the years, and then really getting into what occurred this spring in April and what really kind of brought us all here today, and then where we're going from there. So, Lyford Pond, along with New Pond, which was also at one point called Frisbee Pond, both ponds were part of the Shaker Village, or when the Shakers were part of their water resource project. And so the ponds were constructed in the 1800s by the Shakers for the purpose of really bringing water through what they had called the long ditch down to the other water bodies nearer to the village, in which they actually had mills set up for an assortment of different purposes at that time. So the dams were built in the 1800s, used for water purposes. The last time the mills were really in operation was in the 1930s. Since that time, the dams have obviously remained, the water bodies remain. The use of water has no longer been through the long ditch and down into the Shakers. And so now water, when it comes out of Lyford Pond, rather than going into Long Ditch, it actually goes into Guest Meadowbrook and heads down towards New Hampshire Motor Speedway. And so with that, kind of getting into a little bit of the hazard classification. So Lyford Pond Dam is classified as a significant hazard dam, and that's really for a couple of reasons. Not only do we have the dam located at the outlet of the pond, but there's also the dike along the shoreline of Lyford Pond. And there's a couple of homes built immediately adjacent to that dike. Issue being, if that dike was to ever have any structural issues in which it failed or breached or something like that, it could have significant economic impacts to those homes. Along with, if the dam itself was to fail, it would likely flow down through Guest Meadow Brook and impact not only Route 106, but also New Hampshire Motor Speedway as well. Essentially, there's a large stormwater complex underneath the racetrack that carries all the water from Guest Meadow Brook. That stormwater complex would likely be inundated with water. It can't handle a breach of the dam, and so therefore water would likely come and really flood different portions of the racetrack itself. There's also some other impacts to Robin Shore Drive and a couple of pieces of property off of Hancock Road as well. But for all intents and purposes, Lyford Pond Dam is a significant hazard dam, and so there's certain criteria that we have to meet with that hazard classification. So these are two statutes. I know they're difficult to read, but really they're the statutes that we base our administrative rules on here at the Dam Bureau. So when Jim goes out and does an inspection at one of those 2,600 dams, it's tying back into these state statutes. And really, the first one here is a dam in disrepair, which I'll read it out. It means a dam which is a menace to the public safety and is incapable of safely impounding floodwaters to its crest, or is incapable of maintaining a reasonably constant level of waters impounded, or is one in which does not contain adequate gates or spillways to provide for the holding of the controlled discharge of waters impounded. And therefore, the owner of that dam shall maintain and repair the dam so that it does not become a dam in disrepair. And so here at Lyford Pond, that dam is, because of the issues that we are seeing out there today, is falling into that category of a dam in disrepair. Not only does it have to meet certain criteria to be a significant hazard dam, it has to be able to pass the 100-year storm event through the spillway without overtopping both the dam and the dike. It also has to be able to maintain that water level. And today it cannot maintain that water level. And as you can see here in the photos, and as those of you who use the pond, recreate on the pond, live on the pond, know it really has had difficulty holding the water, particularly this year. So, moving on to what happened this April. So, a significant hazard dam has to be inspected every 4 years by one of our dam safety inspectors. This dam has been inspected on regular intervals. Each time, generally, there have been deficiencies in the past. There's been tree issues. I'll talk about that a little bit more. There's been seepage at the dam. Historically, there's always been some water coming through. But really, this spring, things took a turn. There was an individual that was out walking on the dam late March. All through March and April, we had really, really high water levels all throughout the state. Fortunately, February was dry, so we were actually able to bring water down, provide some buffer, but we got a lot of water in March and April. And so what likely occurred is the water level came up on Lyford and things started occurring. And so when the individual walked out there at the end of March, there was basically fell through a sinkhole that had formed in the dam. So an actual visible hole was formed, and when the earth covering that hole let go, water was observed flowing through the dam, and at that point in time, that individual reached out to NHDS Dam Safety, and we came out the following day to take a look at things. So when we took a look at things, we noticed that not only was water flowing through the base of this sinkhole that you can see here, so that's the sinkhole up at the top of the dam, and then as it's grown down below. But during that April inspection, we noticed all that leakage coming across the other side of the dam, roughly about 50 gallons per minute. Fortunately, it was running clear at that time. Had it been carrying sediment, or anything else, or running turbid, it would have meant that it's continuing to unravel at a very rapid pace. And at that point in time, the state of New Hampshire would have stepped in and done something to reduce the risk to the downstream impacts associated with the dam. So we've been out there monitoring it pretty much about weekly. Once again, there's that sinkhole. As we've been monitoring it, we've noticed the sinkhole has grown in size, and in conjunction, the rest of this area of the dam is starting to subside somewhat as well. Just to kind of lay out where this is located, there's a spillway located on the right-hand side of the dam. That's looking in the downstream direction. There's actually a piece of bedrock in which water flows over. So that is somewhat part of the normal functions of the dam. The area that we're talking about is way over on the left-hand side. So if you're looking at the dam, if you're on the pond looking at it, it's over on the left-hand side. But it's certainly gotten worse over time to what we're seeing here today. And one thing that I would want to mention is roughly, the pond right now is about 2.5 feet below the crest. So it's come down a lot in elevation than what it was back in March and April. That has likely helped the situation. While water is still flowing through and carrying sediment, there's not as much volume of water going through. So while we are still very concerned with the structure, we're not having the volume of water that we had back in March and April helps the current situation out there at the dam. I'll get through and I'll answer any questions once I get through. So back to who's responsible for this and everything else. Like I said, DES has been out there throughout the decades doing inspections, looking at things. Historically, we've been working with Canterbury Shaker Village on this, but there's never really been any issue that has come up in which enforcement really needs to occur, or in which the state of New Hampshire needs to step in and do something to lower the risk, such as breach a portion of the dam. So over the years, the community, working with Canterbury Shaker Village and other stakeholders, have done things such as removing all the trees on the dam. That was one thing that was noticed quite a while ago, so I know kind of pre-COVID time, there was a fair amount of tree work out there by, I'm sure, many individuals out in this audience tonight, doing work at both the dike and the dam to help bring the dam back into compliance. There was always a question on what's going to happen with the sinkholes. I know there was some regrading that took place. Some material was brought in to help level the dam in a couple locations. But really, we're having to now deal with more internal structural issues. So what are some of the next steps moving forward here? So DES is actively monitoring the dam. We're going out there roughly weekly, taking a look at things, making sure it's not raising to a level of concern in which we have to come in and do something. We've also developed an interim emergency action plan. So every significant hazard dam or high hazard dam in the state of New Hampshire has to have an emergency action plan. This dam in particular had not had one. So if a breach had occurred at the dam, there's no mechanism to notify any emergency management officials or anybody downstream or anything of that nature. And so we developed one here at DES. Typically that is a responsibility of the dam owner to develop that, but because of the urgency in this, we developed one. We've distributed that to the community, and we're working on testing that emergency action plan as well. We're also reviewing the ownership here. So one of the questions is who is ultimately responsible for this dam? And so we've been working with the Attorney General's office here in New Hampshire and trying to really figure that out. Now, regardless of what happens as far as the ownership goes, there are going to be issues that have to be addressed at this site. Now, I'll get into that a little bit more, but what will happen based on that ownership? I don't know, but I think there's certain risk with this structure that's happening right now that it's beneficial to have community members, stakeholders start thinking about how are we going to come together to resolve this issue. Because the last thing that we want to do here at the state of New Hampshire is really have to go in there and do some kind of breach to lower the water level during a storm event. And likely the way that would occur is where the sinkholes are happening. We would likely come in, remove that section of the dam where the sinkholes are occurring. There is probable bedrock right there, so the dam shouldn't continue to unravel, but we would remove that section of the dam, lowering the water level so that it can flow out of that area, reducing the risk at the structure. So, the next question is, who are the stakeholders here? Who are the ones that really want to see the benefit of this water body? I believe that's pretty much everybody here tonight. And so, what can the community do, similar to other communities in New Hampshire, to start implementing the next steps to address this? Like I said, regardless of the ownership issue, I think having the community come together, the stakeholders come together, and start thinking about how are we going to address this and really keep Lyford Pond not only in the immediate future, but for generations to come. So just a couple of examples I don't want to dive into. This is Mecco Pond Dam over in Wyndham. This is a quite a bit larger pond than Lyford Pond, but it's an instance in which they had a very old dam with a lot of issues, in which that dam was actually mandated by DES to be lowered. And so that dam was lowered. It was lowered for a pretty long period of time, roughly about 10 years. But in that interim period, the community came together. They formed a lake association, and then eventually they formed actually a village district. So they formed a village district under New Hampshire statutes. That way, all the residents around that pond became part of the solution for rebuilding that dam. And so this is a photo of what the dam looked like before, and then this is a photo of what the dam looked like afterwards, after it was completed. A similar structure, similar age dam to Lyford Pond, different issues, but once again, an example of the community coming together, forming a village district ultimately to help rebuild that dam. Forest Lake Dam. This is another dam similar to Lyford Pond, what we call a double stone wall dam, basically built in the 1800s, 2 stone walls, infilled with earth in between. This dam actually failed in July of last year. This is over in Winchester. And so during those big rain events, they did what they could to try to sandbag the dam, but ultimately they lost the dam at that time. Fortunately, in this location, they already had a lake association that was the owner of the dam. So as the residents around that pond, who are part of that lake association, they came together and are now working on trying to rebuild this structure that you see here. And the last example I want to show is this is Reservoir Pond up in Dorchester. Another similar dam. In fact, it looks very, very similar to Lyford Pond Dam over here. Double stone wall, roughly about the same height. Little different issues here. The bigger issues were really, they had this 1950s kind of homemade concrete spillway here that was starting to really unravel. And so they were having a lot of issues with this dam holding water once again, unraveling. That group of residents around that pond came together, they put in siphons to lower the water body so that the state didn't have to come in and do anything to help lower that water body. They did it on their own accord, put in siphons to lower the water body, came together as a community, and are essentially establishing a nonprofit organization that will take over ownership of the dam, that will likely have funding sources from the stakeholders around the pond. And so, with that, that's really all I wanted to dive into. I know it's brief, but I wanted to have as much time as possible for any questions, concerns, comments, anything like that. I don't know if Dave, you want to add anything to it?
Corey, I think you just nailed everything perfectly in terms of things that need to start coming together. So there's really not much more that I can say.
Okay, thank you.
So here's what we're gonna do, folks. I don't know how many of you are annoyed by the dying battery and the smoke alarm, but I certainly am. So we're gonna address that. So feel free to use the bathrooms, get a drink of water, talk amongst yourselves, whatever works.
Okay.
All right, why don't we come back to order, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Cal.
So a couple of things before we get going. Edgar, give a plug for your YouTube channel, please.
Edgar.
What is the name of your YouTube channel?
It's called Libertad Press NE. If you search on YouTube for Canterbury, New Hampshire, it should come up as one of the videos for the board meetings. It's a chicken in the icon. Libertad Press NE. Because of that, I was just saying, look for the chicken in the icon. That's the one. Yeah.
So Edgar comes and records almost all of the select board sessions, school board meetings, so he's doing a real public service for all of us. The other thing is, DES will be emailing us the PDF of their presentation. It'll probably be posted Monday on the town's website. So that'll be available as well. All right, so before we get going, here is my ask of all of you. Number one, for Cal, please state your name for the record. Cal is taking minutes for tonight. Please be polite and respectful to our speakers. They're here all voluntarily. Please keep your remarks brief and to the point. Limit yourself for now to one question or remark. Let others have a chance to speak. If we have time, we can certainly go around again. But, and I always end up, in the words of Jim Miller, it's okay to disagree. It is not okay to be disagreeable. So with that, who wants to go first? Sir.
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Jim Mayo, M-A-Y-O. When you were talking about the situation, I was a little fuzzy about, is the water running clear or is there still fines coming through?
Well, there's some material moving because the sinkholes are getting bigger. So the only way the sinkholes are going to get bigger is if material is moving. However, if you go out there, it looks clear. So it's not, typically when the material is moving, time is of the essence. It's unraveling now and it's going to happen. I think in this case it's more, a chunk may fall off, that goes through. It stays like that for another couple days, a week, 2 weeks, whatever it may be. Another piece kind of lets go and moves through. So it's not an active thing that's occurring right now as we're talking.
Is it still flowing? I mean, this is like April and May, right?
Yeah.
Or beyond that, is it still flowing now or is it?
So it's my understanding that, it's not gushing to what it was, the 50 CFF, it's 50 gallons per minute. It's now down to much more of just a trickle. So, but the concern being that sinkhole has grown in such size that if the water was to come back to what we had in April or March of this year, it's likely going to be more than 50 gallons per minute moving through there. So it's going to be worse if we have high water again.
And do we have any historical record of how those dams were built? I mean, you talked about being an earthen fill between the two walls, and it's possible it could have been all stone as well. I mean, we don't know. I mean, I guess that's part of my question.
To answer that question, do we have records of how the dam was built? I don't know the specific answer to that. But what I can tell you is that we believe that the dam was actually built in 1835 by a guy by the name of Mr. Lyford, and that's how the dam got its name. And then ultimately transferred to the Shakers sometime around then. And then the Shakers, we believe the Shakers sold all that land in 1886.
If you will, let me just also answer your question a little bit. We have a lot of these style dams all over New Hampshire. And generally the way they were constructed is with that upstream and downstream vertical stacked stone wall, just made out of rubble stonework, nothing like that. And normally whatever is infill is whatever they had to handle. So sometimes there are rocks, sometimes there's sand, sometimes there's muck, there's just all kinds of things. And it may also not be consistent from one part of the dam to another. So we don't know.
Erin Smith, my question is, how do you even start to track down who's responsible? What is the process of trying to track down who's responsible?
Well, yeah, good question, and that's why the Attorney General's office is involved on that side. Because, you know, as Dave said, the deeds go way back. You know, we're not only talking 1800s, back into the 1700s, and so really trying to find out, you know, who owned the land before the dam was built, who built the dam, had the flowage rights, the water rights, everything else, and so that is going to take quite a long time. I don't expect an answer from the Attorney General's office anytime soon.
So it's not the current, it's where it started first and then working way this way rather than
Typically, yes.
Who currently is.
Yeah, typically that's the best way to do it. You almost have to start now, go back, and then come back forward again. Because the deeds now, you can chase those back. You have to chase it back to, you know, what was it when it was all one giant parcel, no homes were there at all.
Right.
And then work your way forward and see where the branches take you on the different routes. And so, unfortunately, I don't know if the dam is going to give us enough time to figure all that out. And so, that's why I think coming together now to try to start coming to some sort of resolution, whether or not, once ownership is figured out, whether or not that's transferred from one entity or another, or it's, you know, come to find out it's owned by, you know, a party that wants to handle it, we'll find out that. But I think it certainly benefits having a community come together now to try to start figuring this out rather than waiting, because quite honestly, if we have another big rain event, I don't know if we'll have enough time.
And then I saw in your presentation that there was some conversation about grants. Is there really some sort of grant that some party could?
Generally, no. For this style of dam, there's very few funding opportunities. Now, there have been grant, you know, like Forest Lake, for example, you know, they had the governor's office involved. In fact, that was the dam site that he flew to during the flooding last July that was on WME. So his office has gotten involved in the legislature to try to resolve something. And in fact, I think he's actually that group has gotten U.S. congressmen involved on trying to source some funding for that structure. But generally, no, there's not the Dam Bureau doesn't have any sort of loan program for this. And there's for the most part, no other loan program that I'm aware of. However, there are certain different pieces around. I think one of the other sites actually was able to tap into some L-chip funding, which is some of the historical funding. Obviously, this dam being very historic, there might be something there that could be used. So it's really, someone would need to do a fair amount of legwork and really try to chase down all these different leads, and I don't know where they would go. So.
Yes. How do you fix the dam? Is there a way to fix it? In other words, if you breached it and you get the water down, can you fix the sinkhole and then bring the water back up?
Possibly, yes. Our intent here at DES is if the state had to go in and do something, we're not going to take the entire dam out and wipe it off from the landscape. We would breach it to a point in which the hazard would be reduced with the intent that someone would then step up and fix the dam down the road. How that gets fixed, I don't know until an engineer is able to go out there, poke around, do some test pits if necessary, figure out what is actually inside of the dam, and then go from there to try to come up with some solutions.
So you don't know if it can be fixed or it can't?
Oh, I believe it can be fixed. As Jim alluded to, those three examples are very similar structures, with the exception of the very first.
Historical grant that you can get on these dams?
Sometimes, yes, but usually it's not that much in the grand scale of the funding. I mean, every little bit helps, certainly. Jim, I think you've gone into some more L-chip.
Right, so some of the dams, the first two dams Corey spoke about, Runaway Pond and Forest Lake, they both had individuals that spent a lot of time contacting every possible source for a loan or a grant that they could do. They had success in some places and they didn't in others. They didn't get one big huge pot of money anywhere, but they were able to piece together enough money along with donations from the public and people around to make their reconstruction happen. But as Corey alluded to, there is no one magic pot of money out there that you can tap into. Some of these funding sources also vary by year, by budgets and other things. So,
Well, I know, I live on that pond. Once it's still done, we pay a lot of taxes to live on that pond. Out of Canterbury, maybe, because if there's no water, you can't tax it. You can't tax the waterfront property. And, I mean, I feel as though the town of Canterbury should kind of jump in on this a little bit and help us, because they're gonna be losers too. They'll lose a lot of money.
I think obviously that's part of the conversation. I think in this case, rather than thinking so much of how the dam can be fixed right now, I think the immediate solution is how can we lower the water level so the dam doesn't continue to unravel. And the last thing anybody wants is us coming in to do something. So I think focusing on that and then jumping to the second piece of how are we going to fix this thing, I do think to answer your other question, it is fixable. I mean, we have, the state of New Hampshire owns some very large double stone wall dams that are being repaired right now. And so it's something that can be fixed. What that exact solution is, I don't think anyone will know until an engineering consultant can spend some time at the site and really dive into how these issues developed, what is the dam made out of, and how can we address these issues in the future. Yep, of course. Thank you.
Carolyn Bartlett. So what would it take for the state of New Hampshire to jump in, claim this dam, and fix it? Just like you said, they have other double wall dams that they're right now fixing it. Why can they not take out a dam and fix it?
So, the state of New Hampshire has roughly 273 dams that we already own. Those dams come to us through the legislature. So the first step would be the legislature would have to allow the state of New Hampshire to take over ownership of this. Unfortunately, the state of New Hampshire is already overburdened with the volume of dams that we already have. Currently, all those dams that we have, we're looking at almost $500 million to retrofit all of those structures. And so, and those are, we're talking Lakeport Dam, the Alden Winnipesaukee to Newfound, and I don't want to downplay Lyford, but if that was to come into us through the legislature, it would be a much, much longer process. And ultimately, we would have to weigh, is it even worthwhile for the state of New Hampshire to keep that structure? Or is it more worthwhile to focus our resources elsewhere in the state?
And that's where the historical societies can come in. Can we get any money from the historical society?
Well, as Jim already mentioned, that could possibly be one source. We have not had luck tapping into that source to repair state dams, but as Jim mentioned, there have been other cases in which very small sums of money have come out of some of those funding sources.
Yeah, this was done in the early 1800s, you said, and it was for the Shakers to live and to work and develop their community, and it's a very, very, very important pond. So is Blue Pond. So I don't understand why we're dismissing the importance of this pond and what it has done for the community, the wildlife, the people that buy the property on it and have lived there for a long time. Now you're saying that it's really not that important up there in the legislature. Why not? The Shakers are very important. It says Shakers, Canterbury. Canterbury is known for the Shakers, so right now we're going to dismiss them. We're going to say, oh, we don't care about that pond. And, oh, what's that pond? And, oh, we let that go because the state of New Hampshire said it wasn't worth it. The history behind it wasn't worth it. The history is worth it. Why are we turning our backs on our history? History is important, and this generation seems like it's turning their backs on the history of this country. And the Shaker Village is very important to this community and how it was built. So I feel that it is very important to keep this pond and dam on the table to get federal state funding or historical funding. It shouldn't be dismissed as, oh, it's a little pond. Please, just think of it as an important pond like every other pond. Please.
Yes.
Jim Sullivan. Can some of that portion of the question be directed to who you think the owner is, which is Canterbury Shakers Village?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that for me?
Sure. She's talking about what this pond is. And at this time, and correct me if this is incorrect, because I know you believe that it was already sold, but has it been, is that solidified in writing? And if it isn't, how does Canterbury Shaker Village feel about that as the rightful owner?
You know, the whole issue with history is very important. You're well aware that the village basically exists because of the historical background. You know, but like with everything in life, there are certain limits, and we still firmly believe that that land was sold. But at the end of the day, I'm not averse to saying that when the community comes together to figure out a solution, I believe the Shaker Village will help solve that problem for the community. That's probably the best I can go right now.
Thank you.
So, Tom Jumbo, touching on this historical thing, there's a big sign at Shaker Village that says National Historic Landmark. When was that deemed that? And was the dam part of it when it was classified as a National Historic Landmark? Because doesn't that constitute federal designation?
I could answer.
Shirley?
So I'm Shirley Vida, curator of collections at the village. So historic landmark, basically, and anything on the National Historic Register has boundaries. And when the village was put up for that designation back in 1991, and then again in 2005, going from the National Register to being a national monument, it was the 700 acres that the current village now possesses. So the only way we get federal funds is because we're on that register for that specific land. So not anything that now is beyond those boundaries. So that's a problem. So either the solution, I'm not saying it's a solution, but thinking creatively here, and I'm just thinking creatively, you would have to expand the boundary into private property, which would also then demand that you have an easement so you can't change things for a certain amount of years, just to be eligible for federal funding through historic monies, through National Park Service, through the National Endowment for the Humanities, and through some other federal agencies. But that's the only way I see it, and that would take years, right? But it's an issue of history plus property plus designation. And if the dam isn't designated, it's not part of that property, we can't work the feds on your behalf, right? At least right now.
So the short answer, the dam is not part.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted clarification.
Yeah.
Why don't we go to Kevin next, and I'll ask you people once again, I'd like to just give everybody in the room a chance before we come back around, okay?
More of a comment and a question, I guess, and that is that there's a lot of people in this room who have ideas and questions about how to fix it. Like, you can't fix something that you don't own. And until there's some sort of an agreement between the state and Shaker Village, why would any property owner, home association, the town itself become involved? To your point, you would need some sort of deed, some liability waivers and whatnot. So all of the ideas that I think we all want to get to start to talk about, none of that can happen if there's not a clear-cut indication from whoever the owner or owners are that they're on board and okay with doing this, whatever this may turn out to be. So my question, I guess, would be is, how feasible is it in the interim, when we're up against the clock, that the state and Shaker Village can come to some sort of agreement as to if the town or if the homeowners or whoever was to spearhead some effort or a contract for engineering or whatever that is, that they're not going to be held in some sort of legal limbo by one of the other groups that are still in this process. It may take 10 years to resolve.
Yeah, I think from the dam bureau's perspective, that until such time as a dam reconstruction permit that needs to be signed by the owner, the wetlands permit that needs to be signed by the owner, until that time, I would think the community in discussions with Canterbury Shaker Village and other abutters would be able to come together, set up some kind of siphon system to help keep the water down so we don't get it up. That's not an intrusive thing that would occur. And could come together possibly and set up a contract with a consultant to get out there and start looking at it and looking at some solutions. Once again, not an incredibly invasive thing that needs to occur. Therefore, those processes can still take place. Like I said, we are doing our part to really try to figure this out through the Attorney General's office. And if and when we have a decision by them or an opinion, we'll be working with Canterbury Shaker Village if they are involved as part of that opinion moving forward. But I think until such time, what I envision going on, I don't think would impede on anything the state would have a concern on. I don't want to speak for Canterbury Shaker Village, but and then the abutters as well. I think in this instance, people would be willing to come together and try to get something moving here to make it work for everyone.
Because the work that was done 10 years ago by a lot of the folks on the pond with Shaker Village kind of coordinating, that occurred in basically about 10 years, right? And so with some sort of mitigation of lowering the pressure on the dam until that longer term solution can be had, you still have to somehow fill the sinkholes. And like you say, whether it's sumps or maybe lower the spillway, whatever that is, you're going to need the permission from the owners to do that. Whether it's even driving on it to fill the gravel. Mr. Bernard or Mr. Pound wants to go out there and fix it. They're taking an awful legal risk upon themselves. God bless them for doing it. And so, is there some sort of mechanism that we can get together to at least clear that hurdle so that we can begin this discussion of who's going to pay for engineering, what can we do in the short term, medium term, clearing, some of the stumps and trees that are still probably part of that issue on the downstream side. Which, in my layman's thinking, is what has caused that sinkhole. A lot of that growth is into the dam. And as that rots away, you've got over your roads and stormwater and everything else. I'm not saying that's what it is, but it's not helping having the dam at least not brought up to where, you can get a good look at it. Right? So I don't know what the answer is, but I think, the town has done a lot to bring us all together, but there has to be some sort of okay to move forward.
And just to tag on what Kevin's saying, the town will gladly continue to facilitate these type of gatherings. If we want to, talk about next steps, we'll be glad to facilitate that as well. So,
who was that last speaker?
Kevin Bragg? Is that who you're talking about?
Yes.
Yes, Kevin is with the HDC, the Historic District Commission.
Perfect.
So, yes. Sorry, Mike, I thought you guys didn't know each other. So, no worries. Okay. Yeah. I understand. I get it now. Yep, I get it. Sir?
My name is Bob Rogowski. I'm a butter and I'm a member of Rock and Shore Drive community.
Can you speak up?
So I'm Bob Rogowski. I'm a butter and I'm also part of the Rock and Shore Sherwood Forest Association owner. We have two pieces on the property. I want to first say that Jim Weber has been a big help in getting communication going, and that's where we started. So I think a lot of people missed the original Selectmen's meeting because there wasn't a lot of time. And I'd like to ask a question, but I'd like Jim to maybe speak on it a little bit. As we talked about a siphoning system, which is exactly what we're talking about, is how to get there. Can we make an association that includes the town, Shaker Village, Sherwood Forest, and the abutters? How is that legal, and what can we do? Because as far as I see, the immediate thing is to be able to lower the water without causing an issue. We're pretty sure that the siphoning would do that. That's not going to upset anybody from Shaker Village, and it's not going to upset any property owners. And I think it basically comes down to, if we don't fix this, it's who's going to sue who. And the bottom line is we'll all lose. If we keep the pond, no one loses. So I think that we should find a way to do that. Where am I going with that? I would be willing to donate to this group if we had an association to help pay for the siphoning. I think we need an action plan, which is what you were kind of getting at, but how we get there and how we organize it. And as far as I said, and I think you might take an offense in the Selectmen meeting a little bit, I think that has to come from the town to at least host that group. But I think we need a formal group that can go to the state and say, we are this association, we are a loose bond, and can we get you to sign off to say, we are still disputing the dam? I don't care about that, that's not going to be in our hand. But we will work together the same way we did on the trees. I think that we all have solutions, but until we have a group that can make a decision, we have no solutions. So I would be willing to be a member of that group. I also said it to Sherwood Forest at the last meeting, and I think we should have maybe 5 people do that and have a group that can actually have an action plan is about talking about what we're going to do as opposed to somebody that can do it. Who can talk to Jim? Who can talk to Corey? As a group, because we're not a group, we're a bunch of individuals that are trying to protect our pond, which is great, but we can't do anything because we have 5 different people making a decision. How do we do that, and would the town be willing to host that part? Where am I going? We could start a GoFundMe page. We could donate to that. We have no way to do that. The bottom line is, if we don't, it's going to end up in a legal battle, and every one of us in this room is going to lose, because we're going to have to pay legal fees. And we may not win, but we're all going to lose something. So how do we get there?
Well, I think that you're exactly correct. You guys need to figure out how to take control of your own thing. Some form of an association is a great start, because then you can have organized communication communication channel, and have individuals tasked with, looking for funding from various different sources, and have that central communication. So I think that is an excellent first start. The legality of whether the town can be part of that association, I don't know. I'm an engineer.
And honestly, Bob, I'm not qualified to answer that either.
That's why I'm, and I didn't know how to
But
get that.
certainly we can look into it.
Thank you.
So, and no one took offense at anything you said.
Jim, could you
So-
explain the siphoning part a little bit, though? That was the part that I thought offered a solution to me. It can't be that expensive either, and it can't take that long to do. And it seems, I mean, I check the pond every day, we've talked about it. There's some of us that have volunteered to check the level. I'm on the pond 5 days a week. I came out of the thunder last night because I thought it was a good idea. But I go and I check the water level every day. It seems to be trickling, but maintained. With that association involvement, 3 of us right here are on the pond every day. We've already talked about, we'd be willing to help monitor the water. We just want to be able to do it. So could you explain what you suggested?
So a siphon is an easy way to bring the pond level down to a safer level. It would just be a series, probably of multiple 2 or 3 6 or 8 inch PVC pipes are very common, that you would run down into the pond, run up over the top of the dam, run them down to the side of the dam. You would put some kind of a valve in it so that you can fill it up with water, and then release the valve, and that water would create a suction siphon to continue pulling water from the dam. Siphons are relatively inexpensive in the grand scheme of things, because it's just big pipes, so it's not cheap. They do require a fair amount of maintenance, though, because if the pond comes down enough, you lose the suction, you have to reprime the system or discard portions of it in order to keep it working. But that is a good option. It's one that you do see more often than not.
That's what I'm getting at. Is it possible for the town to submit or request a bid? I don't know how to say it for this. I'm not saying you pay for it, but can you request a bid for this? I might pay for it, okay? Some of us might together as a group, but they're not going to do this for Bob Gaston who owns on the pond thing. It has to be someone else. Yeah, Marcia doesn't want it. It has to be someone or an association of authority. Maybe it can come back to a group afterwards, but if you could solicit that, and maybe Jim could tell us how to do that, I think that'd be a great start, and we could have an organization after that. We have an organization that needs $10,000 to save our pond in the short term. Okay, now we have a place to go. As opposed to trying to figure out the 17 ways to fix the dam, we need to lower the water of the dam in an emergency. That's number one. That was my point. I appreciate that.
Sure, and Bob, just to finish and I think directly answer your question, I don't know if the town can solicit bids and not somehow assume responsibility for what happens after. It's another lawyer question that certainly we'll be happy to ask. So, sir, I saw your hand up in the back.
Yeah, I'm Doug Pounds, Hancock Road. Again, thank you, like Rob, thank you guys for coming. Appreciate you explaining all of this to us. And Rob, I think you have a good idea. What I like is you had mentioned that there was another community that got together and did this, and they did research and got funds and different things. Is it possible to provide contacts and references to be able to reach out to these people to get advice from them?
It is.
Can you do that?
I've already actually talked to several of the people involved in these others that they're willing to talk to someone, but they have requested that they kind of have a central point of contact. In other words, they don't want everyone in the room to send an email and ask questions, okay? So if you guys would coordinate, even without any kind of association, that, you want to take the lead on doing that communication or whatever else, or Bob or someone else, email me. I'll be glad to share their information. I'll be glad to talk to you and share their experience.
Oh, okay, so you have a point of contact that you can share with us.
Absolutely.
Share with others.
You just don't want to fix yourself up?
What?
You just don't want to pay fixing yourself?
No. Thank you.
Over here.
Roy Lockwood, I'd like to kind of take off on Kevin's point that we need ownership. It needs to be a chain of ownership or whatever. And what I'm hearing is that despite our not knowing that ownership has ever changed hands, Shaker Village is saying it's not us. Is there a legal process similar to a quitclaim kind of deed where if
party who's assumed to be in some way involved in ownership says, no, it's not me, that ownership would devolve to the people who are abutters, property owners, adjacent, or stakeholders in general? Is there, if Shaker Village is saying, we're out of this, although we care about the history. Is there a way for that legal claim to be removed to speed up the process of assigning ownership if the process of finding it is going to be years long?
Yeah, not being a lawyer, I don't know the answer to that. I do think, I think my understanding is Shaker Village, if it becomes known that it is theirs, they will easily hand it over for $1 to whatever group would be involved, to allow that group to take over ownership. In the meantime, I don't know. While the Attorney General's office is trying to figure things out, I don't know if they could do that to answer your question. They might be able to, but that'd be, unfortunately, that's a question a lawyer would have to answer to make sure that could occur. I don't know if the town of Canterbury would know anything on that, but I see where you're going, because that would obviously make things easier and wouldn't drag this along. But I just don't know the answer to it right now. Thank you.
Mark Stevens. When Shaker Village conveyed that land away and deeded it away, within the deed, didn't they, within the deed, reserve the water rights to the mill privileges that the Shakers had had?
Yeah.
They did. My question to him is, did they?
Yes.
Yes. So could they not quit claim deed them, as Lori suggested?
Well, to answer your question is, the Shakers did reserve the right to maintain the dam, get some rocks and stones from the property to do that. And it was important to them in the 1880s to maintain that water body for their wells and other things like that. Over time, you could say that the Shaker Village inherited those rights, and the Shaker Village would be very willing to give up those rights. The thing is that, from what I've learned, is that just having rights to the water does not infer or convey ownership. It's really like, if you have a split driveway, like in my house, I share a driveway. My driveway goes over my neighbor's property, and I have a deed of easement. They'd be like, the same kind of thing, where I have the right to go over that, but I don't own the land. That's my neighbor's property. And when the land was sold, the rights were retained. Very similar situation. But if there was an association or a village district or anything that was willing to step up, I'm almost positive that I can convince the board of trustees to quit claim whatever rights perceived or otherwise.
Follow up, you have the right to maintain the dam, but you also have the burden to maintain the dam. And whatever burden, whatever rights you hold, could those not be put into a quick claim deed? And the problem of ownership.
That's right. Like I said,
whatever rights you hold, and I'm not limiting the extent or the limit of those rights, but whatever level you hold could be quick claim to some organization that formed.
The answer to that is short, yes.
I'm Mike Bernard. Is there a mechanism with the state that, maybe with some consultation of your own engineering, to reset the outfall level without the complexity of siphoning or anything else, and set an outfall that has a calculated volume to be able to distribute the 100-year type event, and set it and get it in place and secure the dam until we sort this mess out, and then back charge on trust whoever gets the quit claim and the organization that it suits to follow. Is there such a mechanism? Can we get this like cleaned up and we can sleep at night, and the people downstream at the racetrack, and everybody will be like, we're gonna be all right with this until we can sort this mess out.
So I think the only statutory authority that we have is to go in and do some kind of breach and then back charge based on that. We really, above and beyond that, we don't have any authority to do as far as, whether we touch the spillway on the other side or improve it or anything else. We just don't have any authority to do so. So to answer your question, we could come in, do a partial breach where the sinkholes are, maybe that is all bedrock, and really by breaching a section of that allows the water to be down at that level and kind of stabilizes everything. It gets rid of the concern that if the water came up like it did in April and March, it won't wash out the top portion of the dam. That could potentially be done. It'd have to be a lot of consultation back and forth. I want to talk to the dam safety engineers, but I think we could come to some resolution on that. Above and beyond that, as far as restoration and anything else, the state doesn't really have the authority to do so.
Joanna or Jonas, did somebody, I saw hands back, okay. Please go right ahead.
Pam Sawyer. Early on, Corey mentioned that the state had come up with a emergency plan.
Yep.
What is that plan?
So the emergency action plan is really just a paper document that lays out if 911 gets called, if someone driving down 106 sees water everywhere, calls 911, or if someone walks out to the dam and sees it, there's a breach going on and it's letting go, they call 911. The emergency action plan puts all the pieces together so that I end up getting the phone call when 911 gets called, and I can deploy our resources, and Canterbury gets notified, they can deploy their resources, and other resources get notified. So that way the right resources come together to address what needs to occur. And as part of that plan, it lays out what will be impacted. So when Canterbury Fire gets notified that the dam is breaching, they can open it up and say, the track is one of the places that's going to be inundated. Immediately notify the track, God forbid they have to do any sort of evacuation, but that would be where they would target, rather than just, we don't know where this water is going to go. That plan puts all those pieces into place.
So this plan does not include, say we get another month of torrential rains, and you see the levels going up, that emergency plan includes going in and doing a widening of the spillway or something like that?
Not at this time. Plans can have, depending on the dam, the plan can have all kinds of parts and pieces. But at this time, that is not part of the plan. Not to say that couldn't become part of the plan. In working with everybody here, we could come up with a plan to say, if it comes up at this level, this is what's going to happen, and then this is when the state is going to come in. We've already looked at the site to try to figure out if we need to do something out there immediately. If we get a thunderstorm that dumps 6 inches of rain and the pond jumps right up, of where we can come in and do what we need to do. But at this point in time, it's not formally part of the plan.
Have you determined how much the water level needs to go down for it to be safe?
We haven't looked at that yet. That's not an overly complicated thing to figure out, but we just haven't figured that out yet, to figure out just how far down does it need to come based on a storm coming through and not taking out the rest of the dam.
Joanna.
This question, because a couple years ago, Jonas and myself met with Sherwood Village, and they were trying to quit claim the dam to Sherwood Forest. We went to our meetings, we decided that Sherwood Forest had no property that abutted the dam, so we really didn't have a right to get to it. But in that conversation, part of the reason they were willing to quit claim it so easily was the tens of thousands of dollars, even hundreds of thousands of dollars they were telling us it was going to cost for the engineering survey. Does that need to be done before the siphon is set up? And I just want to make sure people understand that the amount of money they were talking about would need to be raised just to assess the dam.
In this case, I don't think an initial assessment would be hundreds of thousands of dollars. The full engineering of a complete solution might cost upwards of several $100,000. I just don't know. But to do the siphons and put the siphons in place, that assessment doesn't have to take place.
Joshua, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I'm Joshua Gordon. I don't, you're going like part of the southern shore of Lyford Pond. My question is to Shaker Village. You know, assuming you own the repairing, what you said, you know, just assuming you do what, and then the state said, you know, gotta do something, what would Shaker Village's intention be? Would it be to spend money and do something to fix the dam, or would it be to breach the dam entirely, or what would, assuming you own it, what would Shaker Village do?
So your question is what would Shaker Village do if it turns out that we own the dam?
Yeah.
Just to be very clear, we would probably breach the dam and eliminate any risk that we have to the village or any other properties. We have no need for the water, we have no need for the dam. And we would just go ahead and breach it.
Mark Slayer, I'm a farmer. I'm dismayed at your approach to be willing to simply let this be washed away without concern to the community and to expect to be involved to fix this. You sit there and you're willing to simply sell it for $1 so you can get out of this. And pissed off.
Lisa, here.
Hi, Lisa Shapiro, and this is the Shaker Village. You're a nonprofit, you have duties. Have you thought about how this fits into your responsibility of a nonprofit and keeping your tax exempt status and meeting in good standing if you turn out to do it?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, you said you answered the previous question saying if it turns out you own it, you'd walk away because you don't need it. But you're a nonprofit. You're not just a private sector owner that owns something that you don't want to own, and if it turns out you own it, you walk away. You're a nonprofit. You have duties. You're tax exempt. You don't pay taxes. You're regulated under the Attorney General's office as a charitable organization. Have you looked at your duties and responsibilities of how Lyford Dam fits into your mission and your tax exempt status and your duties as a nonprofit?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not really qualified to answer that question specifically in terms of how these property enters into it. Right now, the Shaker Village Incorporated owns, like Shirley said, about 700 acres. You know, that's included in our property that is subject to easements from the state. We do a lot of different things with DHR. We work with the HDCs. But as far as we're concerned, if the end of this process, which is going to be very complex and take a very long time to resolve, turns out that Shaker Village owns the dam, we would just have to be in a position to breach that dam and eliminate the risk to the community and to ourselves.
Would you be willing to concede that you own it in order to sell it for $1?
Who was that?
Again, I'm not a lawyer, but what I can tell you is that if there was an association or a village district that came together and wanted to take ownership of that, we currently have rights to the water. We would claim those rights to anybody that wanted to take ownership of it.
Maybe Jim can speak to this, because don't think that breaching a dam doesn't cost anything. Jim, spoke about it in the last meeting.
Yes.
The permitting involved, the amount of money involved to get it across private property and then restore it. You could speak much more to this. So if the village did, in the end, have the ownership, it's not like you're just going to go out there with a backhoe and let it go, and it's going to cost you $300.
There is a process to remove the dam or to breach a dam, and so you're correct. They wouldn't just show up one morning after the backhoe and take it. Full removal of the dam is actually a very costly process. It takes a lot of time. A lot of conditions have to be evaluated to get a permit to remove the dam fully. Breaching a dam is a little different scenario. It depends on the circumstances. But there's still an approval process in the DES Dam Bureau before a dam can be breached by the
I'm asking just to, when you spoke before, and I think you're getting, I'm sorry to interrupt, you basically said that if they have to breach the dam, that is not the end of the process. What you're starting to get at, they have to actually repair and maintain, or do something after that. Is that correct? That was a clarification that kind of got where I was at. I understand you can breach it, but you can't just breach it. There are things that have to be in the next step is what I was trying to get at.
For a permanent approved breach, they can breach it and they don't have to do anything else. Because by breaching it, for us to agree to that breach, it's going to not be a routinely impounding structure that poses a hazard. So once it doesn't pose a hazard, our jurisdictional authority is pretty much goes on, except for permit.
Marshall Rogowski, maybe I'm sticking my neck out here, but I'm thinking if he wants to breach the dam and he has to get the necessary approvals and permits, you're going to have to come to all the abutters and make sure that we agree and don't put any injunctions stopping that action on it. So I don't think it's as easy as saying you just want to breach it.
Just a point of clarification, Dave, I believe you really have, if you guys are the owners, you just said in the past, you have two options. Right? One option is to sell or give the dam to another party. Or if you guys ultimately were responsible and could not do that, then you would seek some kind of breach of rule.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The question was is if we did own it, what would we do? Yes, we don't need the dam, so we would want to get it away or breach the dam in that particular case. Now, if there was an organization, an association, or a village district that is willing to take on that dam, yes, we would just simply say, you can have it because we just don't need the water, we don't need the dam.
And one thing, just to point out, the reason I use those three examples up there is 2 out of those 3 examples, actually all 3 examples, they knew the owner. It really wasn't an ownership question. It was a fact of the matter of the owners at least the first one that I showed you and the last one, the owners had no resources whatsoever. There was a situation in which an heir, a grandson, a landscaper that was added in the will ended up with this structure, and they had 0 resources to maintain it. Now, they knew who the owner was, but once again, the community still had to come together. If they wanted to maintain that pond, that was the only logical way of doing so. And so, obviously this is something that needs to be figured out, is the ownership and how, things would be transferred. But I just want to point out that even in those other examples, they knew who the owner was, but the resources just weren't there from the ownership side.
Teresa, did you have anything yet?
I did, Teresa Wyman. I don't
Speak
want,
up so they can hear you, please.
I don't want to muddy the water, but I'm wondering if whatever happened when Runaway Pond ran away and who took care of that dam might be something to look at to try to figure this out.
So, Runaway Pond Dam, as far as I'm aware, has failed twice. My understanding is the first time it failed, it was owned still by the Shakers and they rebuilt it.
Yes.
I'm looking at Mark Stevens' years on this.
That was long ago.
And then later, it was under private ownership when it failed. And the private owner got the appropriate permits to rebuild it.
Jonas.
So the forecast of where the water would go if the dam was to fail, is that information public, and has that been distributed to those who would be affected if the dam was to fail, say the racetrack?
Yeah. So that has been distributed not only to Canterbury but also Loudon and the racetrack. So they're all aware of what would occur if the dam was to fail, and that is certainly a public document that anybody can look at.
So just to kind of segue off of that for anybody that may be a part of this future association, they just became part of the community because they could be affected too. So, as an area of, that might be interested, the racetrack may want to pitch in on that.
Possibly. I mean, they're the ones that are associated directly with the risk. Right. So I don't know. They may, but they may not, because why would they want to pay into something that doesn't benefit them, that ultimately provides a level of, a certain amount of risk to them as well.
That's something that the user association might be able to reach out with.
Yes, most certainly. Yeah, as Jim said, obviously these other groups that have come together, they've knocked on everybody's door, reached out to everybody to really find out who really wants to be part of this and how can we make this work.
Anybody that hasn't asked a question, have you, sir? Please go ahead.
Chuck, regarding the need for permission to work on the dam to try to repair it in the meantime, since the ownership is under question, my question would be, when we did all the tree work on it 10 years ago, where did the permission come from for that? Because can that same entity give us permission to work on the dam now? Because we did a lot of work on there 10 years ago, and it must have been permitted by someone.
I'll note that poster you have, I made that poster. And that was done really informally, and I just distributed to everybody.
So we just went road and did it, right?
And I went to Sherwood Village, the groundskeeper at the time, and I just went over there and informed and said, will you come over and, serve us hot coffee? And it was, we got up, so everyone, Shaker Village told me they owned it, so that's why we felt like we were, authorized to go on.
Yeah, that's kind of my point.
And we got permission from the Northern Pounds.
I think, to do something like the siphons, from a liability standpoint, it's less risk than allowing a bunch of volunteers to go out and cut a bunch of trees. So I think if something similar happened, in which, the two adjacent landowners, Canterbury and Shaker Village, basically everybody involved came together and said, you know what, this benefits all of us. So let's get together and do this as one of the steps to start figuring things out. I know the state of New Hampshire, we would not have an issue with that being done. Because, quite frankly, the alternative might be is we have to get involved and come in and do something more impactful to the structure than simply putting in siphons.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that no one person would be held responsible legally if something happened as a result of us trying to fix the dam. Having not had the permission of whoever the hell
Sure, and anything can happen. It could be, you can have, the perfect setup where you're not liable or anything else, and then someone so chooses to sue you. It all has to play out in the courts. And so I don't know the answer to that, but I think, coming together is, and certainly from the state's perspective, from the Dam Bureau's perspective, lowering the risk is something that we want to see. Now, if someone came in and filled all those sinkholes, filled the spillway so no water could get out, and that started impounding, that would be a much bigger issue that we need to really resolve. But in this case, it's actually helping. It's helping the whole system by doing.
If I understand it right, just to clarify, if it benefits us in a positive manner to save the dam, we're allowed to do certain things, like remove trees, but
those are all objectives the Dam Bureau wants to see get done. If the group can come together and achieve those objectives, then that's a good thing for the Dam Bureau. The only, like I mentioned before, if there was a true reconstruction permit that came in front of us, in which that is one thing that will have to get done when this is all resolved and engineering studies are done and we're trying to get this dam, all the deficiencies, not just the sinkholes, but the discharge capacity, everything else, that leads to a permit that needs to be applied for through the Dam Bureau. That is a point in which we need to make sure that the person applying for that has all the rights to do so, including the rights on the dam and the water rights associated with the dam. In this case, this work doesn't require a permit through us, and so that wouldn't be necessary.
So, a point of clarification, when the tree work was done, at that point in time, Canterbury Shaker Village was not contesting their ownership. They were paying their annual dam registration fee, and they agreed to the work being done as well. They now have a different opinion and are contesting ownership, so we don't have that money. What that means, I don't know. But to my mind, as an engineer, not a lawyer, if all the parties involved that are likely to have ownership, which would likely be Menard, Pound, and CSD, are all on board with having some siphons put in. There's nobody making a big fuss about it. Can't see how it would be a major legal issue.
Sir, go ahead.
Yes, Stuart Russell. I have a question about the sinkholes. The first one is, how dangerous are they? And then part two is, what mitigation measures could or should be taken?
So they can be very dangerous and lead to complete unraveling of the dam. I think in this case, the thing benefiting the dam is likely founded all on bedrock. And so you have the two stone walls laid right onto bedrock with soil in the middle. Sinkholes are dangerous just because they're such an unknown quantity. Water is moving through the dam in an uncontrolled manner, causing loss of material. That material is what holds up the structure. So as that material is lost, there's a risk that the structure is unraveling and at some point will become unstable and wash away. To mitigate that, I think these sinkholes are big enough and wide enough that you have to do something in that vicinity to actually excavate out that area, replace it with proper embankment material, and bring everything back up to grade. In addition to that, probably a long-term solution, one of the things that we see on a lot of double stone wall dams, is actually putting what they call a filter mechanism on the downstream side. So basically adding a slope on the downstream side helps with stability, but that slope is made of certain materials that if water is continuing to wash material, it will stop the movement of that material, essentially allowing water to possibly seep or leak out of the dam, but stop the movement of the material. If you stop the movement of the material, you should be able to stop the sinkholes from continuing to form.
Follow-up. How expensive and how much time?
It's really an unknown quantity at this point in time. Until an engineering consultant can spend some time out there, look at it, and we also need to figure out not only address the sinkholes, but we know that the dam is deficient on being able to discharge the water that it needs to. A significant hazard dam has to be able to pass the 100-year storm event. So that's the 100-year rainfall hitting the watershed and coming through the dam. That dam has to be able to pass that with 1 foot of freeboard, basically the water surface to the top of the dam. And so it's likely that that spillway is going to have to be increased in some size or fashion, or an additional spillway is going to have to be built in order to pass that volume of water. That's why that one photo I showed you, I don't know if it'd be the case at Lyford, but they ultimately removed what was there and put in a new concrete spillway that was founded on top-end material to pass that volume of water.
And just a point of clarification, in order to do any backfilling of the existing sinkholes, will require a wetlands permit, which has to be applied for by the owner. So that's one of the reasons that right now we're not recommending that someone go out there and do any of this. It also really needs to have that engineer do a better evaluation, the engineer that's working for the owner, come up with the appropriate solutions.
So,
Peter Bruckler, there's a lot of passion here tonight, and I think every single person here, this is no question to any of you, this is a comment to all of us here. We obviously have a vested interest, every single person in this room, and I just pray that we don't walk away from here tonight without some type of point of contact to spearhead an association or the community coming together. I hope that we can move forward after tonight and we all stay in touch and build upon this. Thank you.
So, if you were to look at worst case scenario, and we have one of these major storms which are coming off, and you have a catastrophic failure, which doesn't lead to any loss of life, but the day is mostly gone. In order for this community that is forming to repair that, would they have to meet a higher current standard for permits and replacement if they want to have their pond back? Or is there still some kind of a grandfathered thing that they could have similar looking, old style similar specs and less cost.
Yeah. So to answer your first question on the permitting aspect, it really wouldn't make that much of a difference unless, depending on if the impact of the breach which would likely cause a lot more work than what the dam currently needs. So your footprint might change based on that. But really the dam is still what we call, it's a reconstruction of an existing dam. It's not, you don't fall into the brand new dam criteria as if I would have, a vacant parcel, I'm gonna put a dam right here. That is a much higher threshold to achieve. In this case, that wouldn't be part of it. Was there a second part of that?
Okay.
Sorry, no, you've had your hand. Go ahead.
Rick Adler. The state of New Hampshire, you said they could put a spillway in before this, get the process started. Why couldn't that be started to avoid future damage to the dam, to get that spillway at least set to stop the immediate?
It could be. I think we have to exhaust all the siphon possibilities to see if that because the reason for that is there's no certainty in that either. We could go in there, we think we can breach a section. However, if we get into some unknowns, whether we get into rotten bedrock, whether we get into the dam, I mean, it's just 2 stone walls of earth and material. It might just start to unravel on its own and cause a much bigger issue. That's why I don't want to do that unless it's the last possibility and we have a true risk to downstream because of high water. I think a much better solution would be get siphons in there so we maintain what is there now and we're not removing more and then having to come up with another solution.
At that rate, will it absorb a storm? The siphons are only going to move so much water. It's not going to take the sudden gush from the 100-year main. So then we've only solved half the problem.
It could, but there's still no knowns. And having the siphons in place, if the siphons are working properly, lower the pond level to an acceptable level that can absorb the storm event is better than trying to breach a section and then have a lot of unknowns of if we have another big storm event, is it going to continue to unravel? Is it stable the way it is? Lowering the pond is the best alternative to breaching it.
My question isn't whether or not we should lower it. Lowering to, say, a drought level, and that can get your spillway. If your spillway at that point is calculated for that cubic amount of water, then if the event did come, it would immediately start discharging, not fill the pond up to the top. Oh my God, is it going to stop in time? And we're over the top of it. I've seen it over the top twice in my life. I've been there 60 years, 66 years. I've seen it with my own eyes, and I saw it this spring. I wasn't doing it. Let's just say that. So if we're going to siphon water down, let's matching whatever's coming in to whatever's going out, all at a certain level, and then some event comes, and it's more than the siphons can deal with. Now we're going to go right back up to the top again because we didn't give it anywhere to go, and where are we going to be that day?
Well, that's where you gotta, with the siphoning, you gotta build in a certain buffer. And with siphons, you can still, like Jim said, you can add numerous siphons. Siphons can be turned on and off. Siphons can even be throttled, so you're not discharging just one massive volume of water.
But they don't self-engage. This happens in the middle of the night, no one's going to see it until like your driveway is under water.
Yeah. I just think coming in there with an excavator and starting to pull stuff apart, it's like an old house. You just don't know when it's going to end. And I would rather see, the old house stay intact and try to make it work rather than us starting to poke and prod and ultimately end up with a situation that nobody's happy.
I understand. I get that way.
And just as any solution that would be short term would have inherent risk. It would not be a solution that would discharge a 100-year storm without impacting the part of the dam that we know has problems. That's just not feasible. That's a long-term solution. So anything that was done in the short term is going to have some risk. It's just part of the idea to try to get the best balance we can to provide a reasonable amount of safety.
Sorry, I saw your hand. I'm going to go to you next.
So can you talk about this siphoning a little? How much water are you talking about from where it is right now? Is this the level that you want?
No, We haven't done any calculations to try to figure out what that's going to do. Like Corey was talking about, it would be a combination of having that storage buffer by having the lower starting level, and then hopefully having enough discharge with the siphons that the pond level doesn't get up to the area that we know is already compromised for an event that would be frequent. Maybe that's the 10-year event, the 25-year event, but it wouldn't be designed for the 100-year, and that's short term.
Right, the point I'm trying to get at is, we're at a level right now which is not where we're normally at this time of year. As soon as the sun comes out and everything starts evaporating, for us that live in the lagoon side, that's very shallow to start with. If you lower it any lower, you're going to have strictly a marsh. Right. And once it's a marsh, there's nobody getting out on it. I am going to petition Canterbury to say, I don't no longer have waterfront property. I could walk out on it. So you're talking about lowering an indeterminate amount. But even if you lower it a little bit, as soon as the sun comes out, the water doesn't have its natural height. I'm not saying we can. I understand the problem we have. But it does have ramifications. And to Mike's point, it's a manual control event that if it does rain, and you talk about 100-year flood, how much rain is that? I mean, what is that 100-year rain event? Is it 5 inches, 10 inches, 15? What is that?
I think it's pushing 7 inches to this part, but don't quote me on that.
Is that in 24 hours?
In 24 hours.
7 inches in 24? Okay, I actually go by. So,
but the problem is, right now, the dam overtops with our calculations at the 50-year. So it doesn't even come close to that. As it currently stands. So it doesn't even come close to passing 100 years.
And that's to Mike's point, is we're not even close to where we should be. And although the siphon might be a good idea, we really should be addressing that first, because that would be consistent. That would be holding the level all the time.
Currently, we're 1.5 feet above August drought level that we had numerous times in the last 5 years. That's 1.5 feet lower than it is now. And I have the granite part of the planet to measure it from. We're at a point where we're still not low this time of year. We're just right around normal. It's right around 4th of July. It's going to be just like this. And maybe it'll drop another foot and a half of the granite lines and be at still a normal. We go out for economies in pretty much in inches.
And once again, we haven't done a calculation of how far we think it would need to come down. And maybe there is that middle ground balance that provides enough margin of safety to still provide as much pond as possible. Once again, the work just hasn't been done at this point, and I'm not sure that the state's going to do that work unless we have to get involved and do something more. This is what the owner's engineer needs to do.
Can I go one more point? We have a sinkhole now. It's made by a piping that leaked for probably 25, 30 years I've observed. So it's hollow underground, and it's broken through, and we can actually look inside. Now, we don't know if there's tentacles, but I know probably that there isn't, because when we hit the level and that water stopped in that sinkhole, those leaks behind the dam stopped also. So that tells me that our water leak is at our water level, just like a pool, like a skimmer. Well, now we've got a hole in ground. We're not allowed to touch it. And people, I have pictures of officials with their heads in the hole right now. All right, I'm not passing it around, okay? But if a little kid is following his dog down there because he's chasing chipmunk, so we need to be able to do something with that. Either build a crushed stone so it still flows, or whatever we're going to do. But we need to get rid of that immediate hazard, because that's a lawsuit the day after tomorrow. You know, and that needs to be addressed. That is something that really needs to be addressed. And our hands are tied. We can't touch it because who owns it? But something needs to be done with that.
And like, just to be devil's advocate, a kid could fall off the 15-foot, 17-foot off the dam and crack their skull too. I mean, I'm not trying to be difficult to you.
No, I
understand your point. And we have had some discussions about putting up some caution tape and some stakes and whatever else to try to prevent access to that area.
I'll go to the back first.
Hi there, Kathy Mitchell. I'm part of the
the association. I was just wondering, I was speaking to Jim Weber, you had said that Shaker Village had stopped paying dam dues, and I was wondering if you could tell me what year that happened.
Canterbury Shaker Village started the testing ownership in, I believe, 22. And they stopped paying.
That's what I can tell Jim, going back to the 90s almost.
Okay, well, there's two periods of time that they've contested ownership. The recent one, they started contesting ownership, I believe, in 2022, and as part of contesting that ownership, they stopped paying the annual dam registration fee. There was a period of time back in the 90s where they also contested ownership and stopped paying their annual dam registration fee. At that point in time in the 90s, we did an internal evaluation, and our determination was that they were the owner because they preserved those water rights, which now, once again, we're testing. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know what all this means. At that point in time, when they weren't paying their annual day registration fee back in the 90s, we actually gave them, we fined them and made them pay them, which they did. But the difference here is when there is new information that's contesting that ownership and ownership. And once again, the Attorney General's office will hopefully come up with an answer on who the actual owner or responsible party is. It's unfortunately just not going to be a quick decision.
Can I elaborate a little bit on that? So, notifications that go out to abutters or to people to know that the dam dues are no longer being paid by people that have been paying them for hundreds of years?
Well, we haven't had fees for hundreds of years.
Okay.
But no, there is no legal requirement for us to notify any of the abutters or anyone in the area whether the owner of the dam is paying or not paying the fees.
I just find it interesting. I just find it an interesting point that you made. And okay, thank you.
In the back. Yep, you. Yes, please.
Question as far as, we're talking more about past and not so much about the now. I hear about breaching and the water going to the raceway, and I'm also saying, okay, that's pretty serious. I'm hearing about a sinkhole that somebody could fall into and knows what else. And how much danger is there for the people and the families in this room that are using the pond right now? What is the danger? Mother Nature will be breaching once a week. It doesn't have to be during a rainstorm. So help me out. How high is that level of danger?
So, and my just personal opinion is your risk of being in the water body swimming, of having an accident and drowning is probably higher than your risk of being hurt while being in the water body if the dam would have failed.
That's for me, because I'm a good swimmer. How about the children?
Well, once again, I think that there's, unless you are right next to the dam when it let go, I don't think that there's a significant increased risk to you being on the water body, swimming, or kayaking. If you're right next to the dam when it lets go, that's a different story. So don't kayak or swim next to the dam.
Are you gonna wake up on a waterbed and listen?
I'm on the high ground.
Kevin, I know you've been waiting, and then Joshua, what do you?
Yeah, I have questions for the selectmen who are here. What's the town's preference? I've heard 3 different administrative ways to, someone who could receive the deed if that were happen, or could organize all of us. I heard something about a village district, an association, and a nonprofit. And what would be the town's preference if we wanted to start one of those processes? What would you prefer? Have you looked into that?
So the short answer, Joshua, no. You're sort of segueing to what I planned for the end of the meeting, which is next constructive steps. So if you don't mind, hold that question till the end, and then that's what I want to have. The last thing we talk about is how do we all constructively move forward together? So hold that, if you don't mind. Kevin.
One thing real quick on that, I just wanted to mention, as far as I know, the town's involvement, the town would have to approve on warrant article the village district. The village district, benefits of a village district is everybody that is inside that district is taxed. Those taxes go to the purpose of the district. And so if the purpose of the district is to maintain the dam, those taxes go directly to that purpose. associations and nonprofits are different in the sense of there's no taxation requirement for them. So it's truly a different avenue of raising funds. I don't know if you can add anything more to that, Jen, but that's
Right, and the other, village district is a quasi-governmental body. So that taxation is run through the town and then distributed back to the village district for how they're allowed to use it. You can also, the village district can get insurance at the same rates as the municipality. And there are some other, they can bond like the municipality, they can do a bunch of other things. So there are some advantages. The process of establishing a village district requires someone to do all the legwork to define what those boundaries would be. In this case, it would likely be include all the abutters. Maybe it would be larger than that, I don't know. And then that has to be put up as a warrant article, and 50% of the people in the village district boundary have to approve the creation of the village district. Then after that, the village district has an annual meeting, just like the town and everything else, to have warrant articles and change the taxation rate.
So clarification, only that way can apply for a bond, or if there's another option, to give you a possibility to apply for a bond?
I think you can get a bond regardless, but as a village district, you can get a bond at the rates of the municipalities.
Okay, so it's a problem, well, cheaper money.
It's my understanding.
Kevin, did you?
Yeah, I just want to get some clarification on the engineering part of it, in that Mike talked about if you were to know the level that would handle the 100-year wash, that would give you a target. And if you know that the dam is potentially constructed to 106, you must know the volume of water that will go to 2.5 miles. Right?
Correct.
Are those, how is that scenario figured out if you don't know the volume that's being currently retained and what the volume that's come into?
Okay, so our
and it's not a quick one spot. It's more to know, when you talk about getting a private engineer to do these calculations, doesn't the state have a standard that was?
The state does have standards, and those standards are evaluated by me. Those standards make the assumption that the pond is starting at the spillway level, and then models what happens when that 100-year rainfall comes across the watershed and comes into the pond, and then models what happens if the dam were to fail, criteria that are included in our rules, and then have that water go where it goes as it runs down. So those calculations have been done by me. That's how I know that it doesn't meet our discharge capacity rules, and that's why I know that it overtops currently at the 50-year event. What Mike was talking about is to evaluate the circumstances where we're starting with a lower water level, and then figure out when those other things may happen. That has not been done by the state. So that's the difference.
Could the state figure that to determine
my boss tells me to do it, I can do it.
To find a suitable spillway level for spillway.
Yeah, I mean,
because you do have the dike on the other side.
Right.
It's its own issue.
Certainly, if someone was to come forward, and say, we want to look into this siphon solution, we'd be more than willing to help try to get to that solution, because ultimately, we would have to approve whatever it was. And so, it's not necessarily us doing it, but it's working collaboratively to get to that solution.
So you could get to that initial, here's our phase 1 with siphons. And then you could potentially say, here's what the static level should be for the 100-year event. Now, if I'm an engineer that can make that happen.
It likely would be for the 100-year event, because we're looking at something for that short term. Probably a more frequent event than the 100-year, but at least the 50, maybe it's the 25. A lot of that is going to depend on how the numbers all come out. My guess is in order to not have water come up to where we currently have a problem for the 100-year event, you got to pretty much have a pond for it. And so that's not going to be anything in the room to the wall.
Well, we don't know the topography of the pond.
We don't. That's actually a really good point. We have no idea what the topography underneath the water is. So what the standard engineering circles is for dams is we make some very basic simplifications. Okay? And so we assume the volume of water based off of the area and the height of the dam and a simple mathematical calculation. It's likely pretty representative, but we don't know for sure. I don't think anyone else has gone out there and done a bathymetric survey to determine what the pond volume is anywhere, and therefore what that storage volume means.
All right, we have a question in the front row. I know you've been very patient. Please go ahead.
Judy Nelson. I am not a abutter. I do not live in Sherwood Forest, but I'm very interested and also a person that likes to see things happen and with action. And I see people who are abutters looking to shape a village, looking to the state, looking to the town, but I'm thinking that the abutters ultimately are going to have to take the responsibility to form some kind of association. You are the ones that are most affected by this pond. How valuable is the pond to you that motivates you to step up and say, I would take point on this, and then you can have other people come in and assist. But you really need some kind of formal organization, which I may be Scott leading to.
I'm going to get there.
You're going to get there. Yeah. And nobody has asked the bottom question, which I was coming to, approximate cost for, say, putting in some siphons. And I assume the state has a whole list of contractors who do this kind of thing. Does the association could go to or you get bids on what can be done? And put these siphons in as phase one. Cost. What are approximate? I don't expect to see exact, but that gives people an idea of what.
I think there's one thing that hasn't been added is it's not, and I'm trying to jump in, but we didn't get to this point, is it's not just those that are abutters, it's just the Sherwood Forest. And I asked Jim this question, which hasn't come up. It could affect all the people in that area, their individual wells and the water table. So there's a lot more going on than just the abutters on the pond. There's 200 houses roughly in our community, and the water table of these 200 people could be affected too. It's not just being able to go out and kayak on the pond. There's a lot more at stake. And your point is relevant. I've been speaking up to that, and I've been in the meetings, and I think everybody knows I want to be involved. And I think I understand where you're coming from, but I'm not coming from the same point you are. I'm taking a look at 200 houses. I'm not taking a look at just me being a butter on the pond. I think there's a lot more to it than just being able to be on the pond. I get your point, but there's a lot more mitigating factors that haven't come out in this discussion that are relevant than access to swim.
All right, so here's what I'm thinking. It is almost 9 o'clock. It's getting late. I have to work tomorrow, and I suspect some of you do as well, and some of you just gotta go home and sleep.
Okay.
So how do we move forward constructively from here? I've heard from a couple points in the room that we're interested in organizing and approaching this as a group. So show of hands, I guess, is maybe the best way to do it at this point. How many think that's a constructive way to move forward?
I think it's one way.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It is one way.
Okay, who?
No, that's what she said. I understand.
Okay.
I agree with her. I agree with her.
It's getting late, I'm starting to hear
I
things.
said that's one way. I said that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I still look at shape of village and get to the bottom of the ownership.
Right.
Understood.
Responsibility the way I see it today.
So do you want to do nothing in the meantime?
No.
Okay.
I say that's one
So, right.
No. They own the property.
Right. So I'm not saying this is the best way. I'm just making a suggestion. It's really up to you folks.
Doesn't it really come down to nobody wants the financial responsibility of
of it all. And so, as a group, financially, it's a little bit easier, because obviously you have more than one person paying into this whole thing, but consistently, I hear, well, you can get together as a group and you can maybe do this, but we have to find ownership in order to get a permit to get the overall job done. So I feel like, you know, the dog chasing his tail, we're not really getting anywhere, because the temporary fix isn't significant enough to put the amount of money into just that. You know, we need to have the grand plan, and you can't have a grand plan because we can't find anybody who'll say, I'm the person, I'm the one.
Yeah, but, once again, what's the alternative?
So perhaps, when I was listening to the group, I heard that, you know, once upon a time we were paying on something and then we didn't pay, and then we forced Shaker Village to pay. Is there some lawyers that are involved right now that are compensating about you didn't pay your bill and now whatever? I don't know. That's what I'm wondering.
So right now, the ownership thing is in the Attorney General's court. They're looking at it. When they come out with their opinion, we'll sit back down, Canterbury Shipping Village, and whomever else can go to the results.
Does it help the Attorney General to get to the bottom of it when they get how many people are in this room to have a phone call that says, hey, have you heard anything?
I think the timing in which that determination really needs to get made is when we start instituting the final grand plan of fixing this. That's going to take a fair amount of time in itself. I think a group coming together, starting the siphon work, possibly hiring an engineering consultant. There's no reason that engineering consultant can't move forward with coming up with some rehabilitation design while this ownership stuff is being figured out. So as soon as that gets figured out,
How do they do that? Because you said earlier they need a permit, so how do you get a permit without ownership?
not to do with design. It's like designing a house without actually, without your building permit. You can design all you want, you can study what you want, and that's going to answer a lot of the questions that are being asked tonight.
Who's gonna hire this person? Who's gonna hire the engineering?
That's actually what we're going to talk about in the future. So,
But the future, we need something now.
we're not gonna get anything now. What my suggestion is that we meet soon. We can't decide anything tonight. It's just impossible.
Right,
So-
but if no one wants to take ownership and if someone has to be hired to do this assessment, and say this group that forms says, okay, we're going to hire, then Shaker Village is gonna go, not me anymore, we didn't hire them, we're not responsible for it anymore.
You're saying that already.
I know.
Yeah.
And it's only gonna make it even more so if we take responsibility.
It's possible. Anything's possible. So,
I think the fact of speeding up the process of finding out ownership,
I don't think anyone in this room or in the state has that power. I mean, the Attorney General proceeds at the rate that they proceed at. I don't know of any way possible to speed that up.
A few phone calls, or a few hundred phone calls.
Beth,
Mr. Clark, Beth Clark, just out of curiosity, this process for the Attorney General, you say it could take time, some time, a lot of time. Do you have any sense? Are we talking months or years?
Months.
Okay.
Yeah. So
That's a lot better than a very long time of years.
We're talking months, yes.
Okay.
Like I can tell you, I just found out today, the Attorney General, Assistant Attorney General that's assigned to this. So I will be touching base with him, getting him up to speed with everything. And so I'll be doing what I can to help move things along through this process.
So the ownership part might be decided perhaps sooner than we might hope.
Right. I think it benefits everybody to have two processes going at the same time, figuring out the ownership and trying to figure out the on-the-ground solution. That way, you're not constrained about one before the other. I think simultaneously, that's the shortest route to getting an ultimate resolution.
Thank you.
All right, final two questions. Kevin?
I had a question that was submitted by Harry Kinder, who couldn't be here tonight, and it may have some relevance, although I don't necessarily agree with his words. But he asked, why doesn't the state of New Hampshire and or the town of Canterbury use the power of eminent domain to take whatever land or property rights it deems necessary to repair the dam? So if there is a contestant over ownership that goes for decades, is that something that either the state, through it having an owner of record who is not named, violent, or the town deciding that the 200 people that may be impacted, that either one of those groups could, by eminent domain, at least take the rights? Obviously, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the dam itself, repairing the place.
I think, Kevin, for my answer, that's another lawyer question. I honestly don't know. Yeah.
There certainly hasn't been, there has not been an instance in which the state became involved in the dam that ultimately that dam is repaired. There have been instances when the state has gotten involved in sites that, you know, whether the owner is delinquent, whether the owner is unknown and there's a hazard, and every time the state gets involved is to reduce that hazard. So, you know, that would be reaching towards a portion of the dam or anything else. Because ultimately, you know, our responsibility isn't just to the owners around the pond, but it's to all the property owners downstream.
And so, could it be possible? But not the state.
All right, final question in the back.
I want to know if Shaker Village would be willing to participate in this organization equally with us.
I'm sorry, but you repeat that again?
If we form an association to come up with solutions for the dam, will Shaker Village be willing to join us and participate?
Let's say, I'll say that the Shaker Village, when an organization is formed, will be happy to participate in seeking a solution, whatever it is.
Thank you.
All right, so here's what I'm suggesting, is we schedule a second meeting. I do not have a date yet. We will do the same as we did for this meeting tonight. Mail the abutters, post it on the town's website, make it known through all the usual channels. Does that sound acceptable to at least most of you? Okay.
I have a question. Your question. Carol Brook, you said that you were coming to told somebody to hold that thought. And you
Joshua.
Okay, you told it and that you were going to come to that.
That is the thought that I just expressed.
Which is?
Which is, we're going to meet again and discuss Josh's suggestions.
Okay.
Josh, am I right? That was, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
we're
was
agreed.
confused.
No worries.
I thought you were going to give us the big.
I have no big picture. If I did, I would be here. So, really, this is obviously a very confusing issue that I hope we can work our way through together.
Yes, I think we need to come together and get this resolved. We can't, because nobody is going. No, very questions. About what, between this meeting and the next meeting?
So, like, maybe week after next, I do not want to draw this out. So soon. Okay. What's that? I know, but I don't want to wait too long. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded. Does that help?